We are back with another episode of Mac Stories Unwind, the show that's all about the picks. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Today, without a video game pick. Hi.
Same here.
Perfect. Yes, I promised I would stop with the video games for a while. For a while, not forever. So today I don't have a video game pick, and it's good to be here, obviously. But before we get into the picks, John, we should remind people for, that little thing that is still ongoing for the whole month of April, Automation April.
Yeah, that little thing called Automation April, which is, a big thing because there's a lot going on. And we'll have more stuff happening on App Stories, Mac Stories, and Club Mac Stories. But your time is starting to tick. The clock is ticking for submitting your shortcuts to our contest. We have fantastic prizes, and we have categories that are going to be judged by our panel of 10 judges. That includes me, Federico, and Alex, along with 7 other shortcuts experts. To do this, go to shortcuts.macstories.net. There you will find all the details and rules. You can submit up to 2 shortcuts, but you've got to do it by April 20th. So there's not quite 2 weeks left, and the weekend is here. So it's time to get working on your shortcuts, and then head on over to shortcuts.macstories.net to submit them and, see if maybe you win a cool prize.
Yes, and it's been really, it's just been awesome to see people submit their shortcuts and share their experience in the Discord, on Twitter, all kinds of people coming together for this event. Once again, I want to say, don't feel like your shortcut needs to be complex, needs to be long. We're going to have some updates regarding this early next week. With some additions to the contest. But yes, it's been just incredible to see all kinds of shortcuts for different categories that serve different functionalities be submitted for Automation April. And this is going much, much better than I even hoped for this first edition of Automation April. People seem to be having a good time. Developers are having a good time. We're talking to developers, which has also been a great thing to see. Developers reaching out to us and saying, Automation April inspired me to prioritize, to sort of fast track some of my shortcuts enhancements for the app. And that's just awesome. So yeah, keep an eye on Mac Stories and everything that we do, Unwind and App Stories and all those related properties, because it's the clock is ticking, but we still have a couple of weeks in the contest at least. And of course, there'll be content throughout the month of April. So it's just the beginning, as they say, John.
It is. We're only 1 week in, and we've got lots more plans. So stay tuned for everything. All right, Federico, you said that you actually have branched out from the video game world and have a pick for us that's not a game. What do you have for us?
Today I have a music album that I'm really, really loving. It's the new album by Placebo called Never Let Me Go.
That's a good one.
Obviously, always have been a huge Placebo fan, going back to the early 2000s. I was obsessed with the character of Brian Molko, the main singer and guitar player of Placebo, just because of how different, right, the image and what Placebo stood for. You got to contextualize Placebo as they came onto the scene in the late 90s and early 2000s, when, especially in the UK, the sort of the Great Britannia, right, cultural movement and Britpop, and this sort of very much like macho image of the musical artist was what was popular at the time. You look at Oasis, right? You look at the whole. I was reading some articles about this. The whole lad culture at the time, right?
Sure,
very male oriented, and Placebo were just different. They were unique, and they were speaking to the whole generation of kids who didn't feel like they fit into anything that was going on at the time. And from my perspective, I've always liked everything. I loved Oasis and I loved Placebo for different ways, but I was always attracted to Placebo and Brian Molko because of how different and unique they were. And with that context, I think it's fascinating to take a look at Never Let Me Go and give it a listen, because it's in some ways it's a return to form for Placebo. And reading about this album, it actually gave me like this newfound appreciation for what it stands for and what Placebo were trying to accomplish with this album. This is an old school type album. It's a concept album that it's not one of those 20 track releases that is optimized for streaming services and for, gaming the algorithm in favor of ending up with multiple songs on a playlist on Spotify. This is an album, and it's meant to be enjoyed as an album. Never Let Me Go is the 8th studio album by Placebo, and it's the first one in nearly 10 years since 2013's Loud Like Love, which was an okay album. There's definitely some tracks that I love on that album, like Bosco, for example, is a really good song on Loud Like Love. Loud Like Love is also a very good song in my opinion, but I can see why it's not the most popular or widely acclaimed Placebo album, because it was, I don't want to say a commercial album, but I don't know, it's one of their weakest ones probably. And the thing about Never Let Me Go, this is for the first time, it's just Brian Malko and Stefan Olsdahl. So the founding members of Placebo, they're both multi-instrumentalists, right? They both can play all kinds of instruments, and especially Stefan can play all kinds of things, from keyboards to drum machines, to drums, to guitar and bass, and backing vocals, all kinds of things. Their previous drummer quit in 2015, and that's the important context. So I've been doing some reading. I've been reading some interviews and some reviews for Never Let Me Go, and especially the interviews leading up to the release a couple of weeks ago. The band was exhausted from the previous tour, because the Loud Like Love tour in 2013 eventually sort of rolled into the 20th anniversary tour at the time. So they had been going all around the world just playing old songs for the anniversary tour over and over, every single day, every single night, just playing old songs. And reading the interviews, it's clear that they both were feeling just completely spent, completely exhausted. Malko said in an interview that at one point he felt like he was a performing monkey, just doing the same things on stage over and over. And obviously, that is not a good sign for any kind of art form. Burnout, that's not good. And so going into this album, once the world tour of multiple years was over, Olsdahl actually felt like he didn't even know if they had a new album in them anymore. Like their confidence level was extremely low. And the thing that sort of was the catalyst for this album, and this is what I think is really fascinating about Never Let Me Go, is that the creative process was entirely backwards. So Malko said in an interview that they usually started by going into the rehearsing room and just, for months, just laying down musical ideas and tracks, seeing what sticks, what doesn't, and eventually those musical, those tests, maybe they become a song, maybe not, maybe they become a bridge for another song or something. But usually you go, you rehearse for months, and then you go to the studio and you actually record the album. For this one, they started from the cover. So one day, Malko found this photo that eventually became the album cover. And he showed this photo to Olsdahl. And it's from there, they kind of approached this entire process for making the album from the end, which is something so fascinating. It's like writing the conclusion of a story before you actually write the intro. So the photo was this, Malko found this image when he was reading about like this beach in Northern California that was used as a dumping ground in the 60s for all kinds of garbage, from cars to furniture to plastic, like all kinds of just garbage, of rubbish. And eventually, when they went to that beach for a later cleanup effort, the locals, the authorities, discovered that all the glass from that garbage, from on that dumping ground on the beach, because of the beach and the ocean, it had turned into these colored pebbles of glass. Right? Because of the waves of the ocean. And that's the photo that you will see on the album, this beautiful and kind of smooth kaleidoscope of these glass pebbles that you see on the cover. And that inspired Malko and Olsdahl immediately, like this idea of Well, it's weird that we as humans are the only species that is actively ruining the ecosystem we live in, right? And if we were gone, if the human race was to disappear, and I'm sorry if I'm turning dark on this podcast, but that's what this album is about. If the human race would disappear, nature would reclaim itself. Sort of this sort of self-healing process that if humans were gone, nature would still win in the end because it has a way to self-recover and adjust. And if you know me, this whole theme of nature reclaiming space is very much my jam. It's very much my kind of stuff. We talked about this for the video games, The Last of Us and Horizon. I love this idea of like humans have disappeared, nature has taken over and has reclaimed natural space. And obviously, Malco himself, he says that he suffers from climate depression, meaning that he's really, really concerned about the current state of the world for climate change and all the ugly things that we've done to planet Earth. So that's one of the themes, right, from the album. The thing about this album is that it was also created pre-COVID and during COVID, right? They started working on this before the pandemic, and they kept working on it remotely during the pandemic and later after the lockdowns. So there's multiple themes going on. One is the climate change and the fact that we are ruining the planet effectively, and that most of us just don't care about it. The other one that you find on the album, and you actually find it in the lyrics of some songs, is this idea of the image that we present to the world of ourselves, this highly filtered image that we present on social media, on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, and how much we always try to clean it up, to filter it, to compress it, to make it better. And so Malco and Allstall figured, why don't we play on this theme? And that's why you see that on the album, in the marketing materials, on the cover, in the videos that they have released on YouTube, that this glitchy art, right? These visual artifacts, this pixelation, this glitch art is everywhere. It's on the cover, it's in the videos, it's in the photo shoots that they have done, sort of to take this idea to the extreme. What if the image that we, Placebo, the band, present of ourselves is no longer the sort of counterculture image of these two people who struggle to fit into any specific boxes, but what if we take this concept of the image that we offer to the world to the extreme and we glitch it all out? And that is, again, fascinating, because I don't think it's the first time that I've seen this done. I mean, glitch art obviously is a whole thing,
right?
That is very much a trend at the moment, but done as a concept for an album is also fascinating. Another concept that you will find in Never Let Me Go, the idea of surveillance, right? The state of surveillance by the government, by other people. One of my favorite songs from the album is Surrounded by Spies. Really, really great drum track, drum loop in this song. And in Surrounded by Spies was actually written because Malco, and I would love to get the details of this story, he realized that his neighbors were spying on him.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And eventually became this song, this broader topic about the surveillance state. And, I believe London is one of the most, as the highest number of cameras in the streets, the city of London.
Yeah, Chicago's like that too.
Yeah, and so this idea of like we are constantly monitored, whether it's by the government or by the authorities, but also by other people, right? On social media, you're constantly checking out someone's profile and all their photos and stories. So that's fascinating. The video of Surrounded by Spies is actually done in the style of CCTV cameras. So that's also with glitch art, obviously. Mm-hmm. So that's also cool. And lastly, obviously, it's about the music and it's about the sounds,
sure.
right? This is Malco described it as a wanting to go back because of that thing I mentioned a few minutes ago, that they were exhausted by the Loud Like Love tour and playing old songs over and over. They wanted to just go back to the drawing board and have this more rough, and he said brutal, this brutal sound once again. And they said the end result is maybe a little softer than we initially imagined, but effectively they surrounded themselves with all kinds of stuff, with all kinds of like boutique keyboards and pedals and drum machines, synthesizers, loops on the computer, and they mixed it all up. And this album has a lot of unique moments, like the opening track, Forever Chemicals. It starts with this sound, with this loop that is really hard to pin down. Like, what is it? It sounds like church bells, but it's not. It's actually this, it really throws you off balance because it's actually a drum pattern, but it's been run through a preset of harps. With a lot of distortion on top of it, so it's actually a drum loop, but it sounds like a distorted bell, but it's actually a harp preset. So they do all this kind of really wild and fascinating electronic experimentation in this record, and I don't know. There's just this general sense of discomfort, of in a good way,
right,
of uneasiness throughout the record. Marco actually quoted. Marco was really good friends with David Bowie. When Bowie was alive, he's one of his idols. He refers to Bowie as his mentor and close friend. And there was this quote from an interview saying, "If you're done in the creative process," and I'm quoting here, "if you're feeling comfortable, you're doing it wrong." And I can sort of relate to what Bowie was saying here. Like the creative process, the artistic process, it should make you feel uncomfortable when you're creating something, because you should feel that tension deep inside of you, right? We all feel this when we're making things. Well, like we talked about this for Automation April. Like,
yes,
totally different from the dystopian album that Placebo have made, but that feeling is the same. So
right.
I love this record. I love all these messages, all these themes, all these concepts, and the backstories that Marco and Allstall have shared. So I guess go listen to the album. It's a really good one. Forever Chemicals, Surrounded by Spies, Beautiful James, right? The Placebo, once again, talking about this relationship that goes beyond the heteronormative sort of boundaries that are considered quote-unquote normal by a lot of people, unfortunately, with this relationship with this James. I don't know. I really love this record. Read the lyrics, read the interviews. I love Placebo, and Never Let Me Go, really good album.
It is a really good album, and I really love all those backstories you told, because I have not done the same amount of reading about this album that you have, and it's fascinating to me what happened with them getting burned out on tour, and then taking the this new direction and experimenting with all these sounds. That's really fascinating. This episode of Mac Stories Unwind is brought to you by Collide. Collide sends employees important, timely, and relevant security recommendations for their Linux, Mac, and Windows devices right inside Slack. Collide is perfect for organizations that care deeply about compliance and security, but don't want to get there by locking down their devices to the point where they become unusable. Instead of frustrating your employees, Collide educates them about security and device management while directing them to fix important problems. Visit collide.com/MSU to sign up today. That's KOLIDE.com/MSU. Enter your email when prompted to receive a free Collide gift bundle after trial activation. Collide knows that end users are IT administrators' most significant untapped resource and key to solving the most challenging to fix security issues, including instructing developers to set passphrases on unencrypted SSH keys, finding plain text two-factor backup codes and teaching end users how to store them securely, convincing employees to uninstall evil browser extensions that may sell their browser history, and a whole lot more. Those are just some of the many use cases not solved by locking down devices. You can try Collide and all of its features for an unlimited number of devices for free for 14 days, no credit card required. Try it out at collide.com/MSU. That's KOLIDE.com/MSU. Our thanks to Collide for their support of the show. All right, Federico, it's time for my picks. And I actually have two this week. I want to start out with one which I guess is semi-self-promotional in a way because it's a podcast. It's called Magic Rays of Light. And I'm a guest on this podcast. This is a podcast that is hosted by Sigmund Judge and Devin Dundee. And it's if you've ever been to Screen Times, it's a fantastic website that covers Apple TV. It covers TV Plus shows. It covers all sorts of things that are related to the Apple TV and the entertainment that Apple is making. And I was on a recent episode. It may be out around the time of this episode, probably just a little bit after. And we talked all about Severance, which is a fantastic show. I can't recommend it enough. I haven't recommended it here, I guess, officially, but this is kind of also a recommendation for that. But we talked all about the show in this episode. But more broadly, Magic Rays of Light talks about things like the shows, but it also goes into they do bonus episodes where they are interviewing people who are in the industry, who are making these shows. Sometimes it's the actors, sometimes it's people behind the cameras. It's really fascinating. If you like to know how shows are made and who's making them, it's a fantastic podcast for that. So if you haven't checked it out, go look for Magic Rays of Light on Apple Podcasts or whatever other podcast player that you use. My second pick, Federico, is a TV Plus show. Today is all about TV Plus. I've been watching a little bit more TV, and this pick, I don't usually pick something this early in a series, but this show called Slow Horses on TV Plus is fantastic. I've only watched 2 episodes. I think there are 3 out. I got to catch up on 1. But, I think they dropped 2 and then they're doing weekly after that. And it's what they call a limited series, in that I believe it's only 6 episodes. And it's based on a novel by Mick Herron that was published in 2010. It's a whole series. There's something like a dozen books, I think. And the first season that has started is based on the original story, which was called Slow Horses 2. And the premise of this is it's set in England, in London, and it's about a group of spies in MI5. But these aren't just any MI5 spies. These are kind of disgraced MI5 spies. They have each had something happen in their career where they're on the outs with the bureaucracy. And so they were sent to what's called Slough House. And that's kind of where the Slow Horses name comes from. But Slough House is kind of a rundown building in London. It's not fancy like the headquarters for MI5. They work in this kind of old building, and they have this boss who's kind of an irascible, nasty, caustic drunk. And he runs this place with maybe a half a dozen spies in it. And they've all been relegated to doing these really awful tasks. It's really just boring paper pushing, or, one guy has to kind of go through the garbage of a suspect, picking through all of his, his refuse on the floor of the office to try to find clues. And the latest addition to this group of spies in Slough House is River Cartwright, and he's played by Jack Lowden. And he ended up there because he was on a training mission in the original first episode where it went horribly wrong. And he was there's the implication that he was sort of framed, that he was set up to fail, but he failed this training mission. And as a result was disgraced and sent off to Slough House. But he still wants to make a difference, and he still wants to be a real spy and not just push paper around. So he starts investigating this far right-wing organization in England that ultimately kidnaps a Muslim student from Leeds University and is threatening to kill him. So the rest of the episodes that I've watched and the whole first season revolve around trying to figure out who is this group, what's going on, what are they going to do, who's involved, and all that sort of thing. And he's really not supposed to be, River Cartwright's not supposed to be doing this. This is supposed to be for, the official spies, the MI5 spies who who are really going to, save the day. But he goes poking around, and all sorts of things follow from that. And it's really, what I like about it is it's a really classic spy genre in the kind of vein of Jean le Carré, like really old school spy show. And it's really well done. The boss, the drunk boss, is played by Gary Oldman, who's a great actor. And it's a good ensemble cast that works particularly well. And there's a great theme song at the beginning too that Mick Jagger did. Fits really well with the show, I think. But I've really enjoyed this one. I've watched the first 2 episodes, and I'm looking forward to probably going to watch the third one tonight because it's particularly good. And it's, you may want to wait a couple of weeks if you want to binge it all at once. But I think it is actually a show that works well in smaller doses. I don't think you really want to watch 6 hours of this at once. It goes down pretty nicely as 1-hour episodes.
All right, I'll have to check it out because I kind of dig the premise of it.
Yeah, it's really neat. I like it because they're this B team that's trying to make it and get back in the good graces with their bosses at MI5 and poking around in this. And there's the tension of the student has been kidnapped and his life is threatened, and so there's a time pressure to figure out what's going on and who's behind what's happening. All right, Federico, that's it for another week of Unwind. You can find us at macstories.net. Don't forget to go over to shortcuts.macstories.net and enter the Automation April contest. You can find Federico on Twitter and Instagram where he's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHEES. Talk to you next Friday, Federico.
Ciao, John.